talk NBA free agency. Here's what the champs have done since Friday. LA has brought in Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, Wesley Matthews. So far, Schroeder finished runner-up for Sixth Man of the Year last season, while Harrell was the winner of that award. And then Markieff Morris tweeting that he's returning to the Lakers. Marc Gasol is finalizing a deal, according to Woj. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is locked up as well. Max, all that being said, who is the biggest threat to the Lakers in the West?
I actually think, based on what I've seen so far in the offseason, where I think the Nuggets really didn't take a step forward, where I think the Clippers maybe got marginally better with the Ibaka signing, where I look around, obviously the Warriors are hobbled. I think it's the Mavericks if they stay healthy. Porzingis won't start the season because they're being very careful with his knee. But assuming that he is rested and healthy, and he'll have most of a regular season to ramp up and to make sure he's in shape for the playoffs. In fact, he's going to play, especially considering the start date of the season, he's going to play the vast majority of the regular season, knock wood. I look at that Mavericks series against the Clippers, and I thought the Clippers were lucky to get past them. The Mavericks, don't forget, the Clippers were lucky when Porzingis got ejected for something he shouldn't have been ejected for. They won that game, and then eventually Porzingis couldn't play, and they won out. But I thought the Mavericks were the better team based on what I saw, and when both teams were at full strength, they were better. And by the way, Luka Doncic is a superstar, and he's so young, he is likely to get better. There's actually room for improvement in his game. He can shoot the ball better. He takes a lot of threes. But he can shoot the ball better, and he looks like a shooter. Like when he shoots the ball, you go, yeah, that looks good. I expect his shooting to get better, Stephen A., which is scary when you think about it. I expect his defense to get better because he's not a good defender, although maybe not quite as bad as his reputation at this point. When I look at Kleber and the roster surrounding these guys, they have length, they have shooting. I think the Mavericks are the biggest threat to the Lakers if they are healthy.
I disagree with you. I think the number one threat to the Los Angeles Lakers, who are the clear I don't want to say by a mile, but pretty damn close. The Los Angeles Lakers did due diligence this offseason. They put in the work that nobody else in the Western Conference put in, which is inexplicable to me. And I think acquiring a guy like, Montrezl Harrell, keeping Morris, adding what they added to the equation, trade and what have you, I definitely think that the Los Angeles Lakers are the clear prohibitive favorite. Number two behind them would be the Los Angeles Clippers. As far as I'm concerned, the Dallas Mavericks improved defensively, but they've taken a step back offensively. I'm not a believer. The Denver Nuggets should not have lost Jeremy Grant. I don't know why he took $60 million from Detroit, but didn't take it from Denver. It doesn't seem to make much sense to me, even though I believe in Michael Porter Jr. I still think that the Denver Nuggets, in terms of their depth, I don't think they're the same team. I think the Los Angeles Clippers are the team to look out for. When you look at Harrell was obviously the Sixth Man of the Year. He was an Energizer bunny off the bench, but he doesn't necessarily have Ibaka's game. Ibaka's got his size, his height, maybe even a little bit taller. He definitely has a better perimeter shot. He's a better rim protector as well in terms of, blocking shots, if not rebounding. All of those things added to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and their motivation, having something to prove after getting bounced out the way that they did. I don't think enough can be said about that. I'm certainly not saying they're better than the Los Angeles Lakers because we know better. But when you look at the fact that they've got a new fresh voice in Ty Lue, who's anxious to prove some things, who knows a thing or two about how to coach LeBron James, let alone against him. Then you combine that with Kawhi Leonard, your best player in the world, Max, at least until he got bounced out by Denver. The bottom line is that when you consider all the things that they had to do to acquire Kawhi Leonard, if there is somebody that's got to step up and produce and shows that he was worth all the sacrifices they made to get him, it's him, Mr. Load Management himself. He is a great, great player, a top 5 talent in the league. But he ain't even in the top 20 when it comes to leadership. We all know that. Paul George is a star, but But you can't be a superstar unless you show up when it really, really counts, which he has yet to prove. And I love the guy. But you combine those two with their talent, with the motivation, with Ty Lue and Serge Ibaka being added to that equation, I would say, even though they're not better than the Lakers, they're better than everybody else in the Western Conference when it really, really counts.
Know something? I like the offseason move of picking up Ibaka, especially on the deal they did, but he's not going to fix what you just said, Stephen A. I would be with you on the Clippers if I thought Paul George was a rise to the occasion kind of guy. Now, Kawhi choked in Game 7, right? Like, he had a bad game, especially in the second half, but it was
what do you
odd
mean he's not
because
going to
it's
fix
so
what I said?
unlike him. What I'm saying is, when you point to Paul George and talk about becoming a superstar instead of just an all-star, you were the one who made a big deal about him hitting the side of the backboard, right? The acquisition of Serge Ibaka doesn't fix that in Paul George, who's really one of your centerpiece. Like, you have two centerpiece, right, cornerstone guys, Kawhi and Paul George. When I look at the Mavericks and I look at their cornerstone guys, Luka Doncic is a killer. And Kristaps Porzingis, give me Porzingis in the playoffs if he's healthy all day over Paul George, in the playoffs especially. And then I mentioned the supporting cast, guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, right? Like, good, long, they can defend, they can shoot. And they had Josh Richardson, a real 3-and-D kind of wing. And they had a good offseason, especially considering it looked like they had limited resources. If they stay healthy, to me, the Mavericks have a top two that stack up with just about anyone. Even if you wanted to say who's the best top two other than LeBron and AD, this upcoming season, I anticipate that's going to be Luka and Porzingis, and they have a deep and effective supporting cast and a real coach. I really think it only matters. The health is really the only question for me. If they stay healthy, to me, that's the team.
Well, that's a big if because of Porzingis, and we know how fragile he is. Talented, but fragile. And when the game slows down in the postseason, they tend to get more physical with you. Obviously, he can put up buckets. He's 7'3", and he can shoot the rock. We get what Porzingis brings to the table when healthy. The reality is, though, because the game slows down and you're allowed a bit more physicality, that usually hinders him in some capacity. That's number one. Number two, again, you can't fix Paul George, but that was an aberration. I don't expect him to hit the side of the backboard again, okay? I still expect him to average over 20. I think his shooting percentage will be better. But Serge Ibaka is an upgrade from Harrell, who I love. Love Harrell. But he's not Serge Ibaka on the defensive side of the ball as a rim protector, and he's certainly not Serge Ibaka in terms of the ability to hit those shots. And you got to remember, because Serge Ibaka can hit those shots, he's a guy that's going to get some of those opportunities that Montrezl Harrell never presented. Third, and more important, let's understand this about the game of basketball. If you are not a threat from the perimeter, it allows me as a defense to key even more on the perimeter threats because I don't have to spread my defense but so much, and I'm not compromised because I don't have to worry about Harrell on the perimeter. But I got to worry about Ibaka because not only can Ibaka hit a 15 to 17-foot shot, he can hit threes. And if he can hit threes and he's on the court with a Kawhi Leonard, with a Paul George, with a Lou Williams, I'm sorry, I think that when you look at the Clippers against everybody outside of the Lakers, I definitely believe that the Clippers could easily be the number one threat to the Lakers, especially when you consider the fact that this could be Kawhi and Paul George's last year in L.A. with the Clippers. They got a player option after this upcoming season.
Look, I hear your Ibaka point. Him and Morris especially give you power forwards who can shoot the ball and defend. But as I just mentioned, the Mavericks also have power forwards with size who can shoot the ball and defend. And the Mavericks have size, obviously, with Porzingis. And the Mavericks have a superstar who leads in the way that you want Kawhi to lead. You lament the fact that Kawhi doesn't lead the way Luka leads. And, by the way, as opposed to the Clippers, who we know who they have. Kawhi is who he is, and he's great. Paul George is who he is, and he's excellent. They have ascending talent on the Mavericks, and they got better in the offseason.
Defensive talent.
Stephen A., we just saw these
talent, not offensively. Defensive talent, not offensively.
We just who doesn't have offensive talent?
Dallas. I said they haven't ascended offensively. They've ascended defensively. They lost Seth Curry. That's a big loss,
because of Richardson.
They lost Seth Curry. That's a big loss.
I hear you. I hear you. Because of Richardson, but Richardson does give them defense and enough three to call him a 3-and-D player. Like, he is legit. On this team, Stephen A., you have ascending superstars, and the main thing for me is this. They were my sleeper team last year, right? If insofar as you have a sleeper team in the NBA. I saw a series that the Clippers were lucky to win. They won because the Mavericks weren't healthy. Had the Mavericks been healthy, they'd have beaten the Clippers.
All right, let's stay with the hoops, guys, but we're all from the East Coast, so we go there next. Coming up on first games in the Staples Center, but now for the other team. After he chose to sign a 2-year deal with the Lakers in free agency, he called his decision to leave the Clippers, quote, a business decision. Matt Barnes, who made the opposite move from the Lakers to the Clippers in 2012, joining the debate right now. Matt, great to have you with us. Well, there you are. Hope all's going well during these crazy times. Happy to have you. Yeah, of course. Stephen A., I'll start with you. Do you think the Clippers are blowing free agency?
I wouldn't say blowing it. I think that's too strong of a word when they just acquired Serge Ibaka. But I will say this. First of all, Montrezl Harrell needs to stop lying to some degree, or people need to stop lying on him, because we've heard about the friction between him and Paul George and how that led to a lack of appreciation he felt he was receiving from the organization as a whole. Now, either that's the story or there's a whole bunch of people lying on him, because you see those reports all over the place. That's number one. But I look at Serge Ibaka, the acquisition of Serge Ibaka, and I'm certainly not going to say they're blowing it. Here's what I would say. They still need a point guard, and that's no knock against my brother Patrick Beverley. I got love for Patrick Beverley. I think that he's a stout defender. He's an Energizer bunny. He's a professional pest, and I think every lineup needs that. But you also need a quintessential point guard to be an extension of the court on the floor and to really, really run that show for you. And Patrick Beverley is not viewed in that regard, not just by the coaches, but also by his teammate. Kawhi Leonard, from what I was told, wants a point guard and wants a prototypical point guard, essentially. It was supposed to be Rajon Rondo. Max, what happened is that Rajon Rondo thought that he was going to end up going to the Clippers. But the Atlanta Hawks, rather, came up with about almost $10 million more than the Clippers were willing to offer him or could offer him. So as a result of that, Bill Duffy, like any other agent that knows what the hell they're doing, particularly in this day and age, is always going to emphasize to you to take the money, because you could always be traded later, but get your money first. That's what they're going to do. And that's the reason why Rajon Rondo is in Atlanta as we speak, because he could always get traded to somebody. But the bottom line is that doesn't mean you'd get the money. Get the money first. That's why Rondo is not with the Clippers. If Rondo was with the Clippers, along with Serge Ibaka, I think free agency would have been a home run for the Clippers. But because that was not what happened, I'm not going to say they're blowing it, but that is something that they need to address.
Well, literally, that's exactly what I was going to say. I thought that we disagreed about this, but apparently we don't. I think they are blowing free agency, and it's not that they're not doing a good job. Serge Ibaka is a great pickup for them. Versatile defender who can stretch the floor to go next to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. It's a perfect fit, especially when you still have Morris and you have depth and size and defense and shooting. But what they are missing is a floor general to make that offense more cohesive. It's not like station to station, half-court offense. Kawhi Leonard is a lot of things, and he's an above-average passer even at this point in his career for his position. But that's different than being like a point guard. You know, if you're going to run your offense through Kawhi Leonard, that's fine. You can do it. In fact, you know, you can do it to great effect. But to beat the Lakers, you should have a dynamic playmaker who's not Kawhi Leonard, right? So had they, for example, made a move and somehow acquired Drew Holiday, I'd be thinking about the Clippers differently right now. Right now, I know Clippers are kind of the hot pick as the second best team in the West. But as you know, earlier in the show, I like the Mavericks better if they're healthy than the Clippers. I don't think the Clippers have done enough to address the issue, which is Patrick Beverley, who's a nice player, a 3-and-D guy who's short, so he's a point guard, is not a dynamic playmaker. So Rondo, I thought, was heading for the Clippers. Stephen A., you gave information as to why that didn't happen, and he would have been an excellent fit on the Clippers, especially since he's playoff Rondo. But Drew Holiday or someone like that. There were other options that you could have fit onto this team and gone like, wait a minute, the Clippers are a real threat. And I don't feel that way at this moment.
I agree with Stephen A. I can't call it a disaster because you are able to sign Serge Ibaka and you did re-sign the Morris twin. But at the same time, I think we're looking at it from a standpoint of that Lakers are really going out like they fell short last year because their counterpart down the hallway, the Lakers are really active and pursuing and getting who they want. I think it makes the Clippers kind of look like, man, are the Clippers dragging their feet? What's going on? I still think they got some time. Obviously, they have until the trade deadline, but I don't want to beat a dead horse. They need to address the point guard-ish situation there. They need a floor general. It wasn't Rondo. I talked to CP before CP went to Phoenix, and CP, had interest in going back to the Clippers. They didn't want to pull that trigger, so the Clippers need to address the point guard play. And then there was, there is stuff floating around about the chemistry in that locker room last season. So whether Montrez was the blame of it, I'm sure you can't put all of it on it. They decided to part ways with him. But, I think number one issue is they need to address that point guard situation and then try to get on the same page. Because I think last year we were waiting for them to hit that chemistry mark last year because we just figured they'd been injured and hadn't got a chance to play together. But there was more behind the scenes that we didn't really know until now.
Well, Matt, it's interesting that you bring that up because a few weeks ago, I talked about the Clippers wanting CP3 or Rondo. Obviously, CP3 would have been the preference, and I also know he's got a great relationship with Ty Lue, and as a result, that had him strongly interested in returning to the Clippers because of the relationship with Ballmer as well, who he still has dinner with a lot of times. But here's the reality. This is what puts the real onus on Kawhi Leonard, in my estimation. And I really want to hear what you think about this, Matt. The Clippers gave up all those assets. It wasn't just to get Kawhi. It's because Kawhi insisted he wanted Paul George. It wasn't enough for him to come to the Clippers. He sat up there and said, if you don't do what it takes to get my man Paul George here with me, I'm going to go to the Lakers and join LeBron and AD. Ballmer couldn't let that happen. So they mortgaged the farm and to get him, which is that's their decision. It's not his fault per se. But because of that, they didn't have the assets necessary to now give Oklahoma City to get CP3. And so not only did you use those assets to acquire Paul George, it prohibited you from having the assets necessary to get CP3. And that's why I look at Kawhi Leonard and say, excuse me, if anybody is on the clock, if anybody is on it, like we should have our eye on him, it's him. Because you're the guy that can play, but are you that galvanizing leader? And on top of it all, are you willing to accept the fact, damn, I know I'm a two-time champion and a two-time NBA Finals MVP, but they did all of this just to get me. And I didn't even get us to the conference finals. What you gonna do about that? I think it's fair to ask Kawhi Leonard, what the hell are you going to do about that? When you talk about him, Max, being the best player in the world, which you was talking about before you came to your senses after he lost in the postseason, I say this to you, Max Kellerman, and I'll throw it to you, Matt, as well. We sit up there and we look at everybody else. Kawhi Leonard has never been in the eye of the storm as the man. Let's put him there and see what he's got. What's wrong with that?
Well, first of all, Kawhi put himself there when he opted not to go to the Lakers. Instead of joining a team where it would have been impossible for anyone to beat that team, and it really wouldn't have proven anything, AD, LeBron, and Kawhi, he decided to challenge LeBron head up. Now, it didn't work out. He didn't even get to the conference finals, but no one has to put him in the eye of the storm. He put himself and he trolled LeBron all season.
Hey, Matt.
Let me say this quickly, Matt. It's not an either-or. It's not an either-or, Stephen A. Like, he got Paul George there, and they didn't have the assets to go get CP3. CP3 and Kawhi is not enough to beat AD and LeBron. Four great players, two of them are taller, much taller than the other two, and a little better, right? CP3 with Kawhi and Paul George, now you're talking. So that's what I mean by they're blowing it, Matt. There's no CP3 on the team. He switched teams, but he didn't switch to the Clippers, right? Drew Holiday was on the move, didn't go to the Clippers. Even Rondo didn't go to the Clippers. They didn't get what they actually needed so far.
And I agree from a standpoint of, Kawhi hasn't shouldered enough blame. When you're the superstar on the team and they go out and get who you want, which is Paul George. And I haven't given up on that combination. First of all, they didn't play together a lot enough last year.
Neither
But at the same time, I think after one season and a crazy season as it was, you can't give up on Paul George. You know, we just had Paul George on All the Smoke last week. He's energized, out on a mission, so I'm excited to see what he does this year. But at the end of the day, the glaring weakness on this team is the point guard position, and they did not address it yet. Hopefully they still have some time, and you always know there can be a dark horse trade that no one's talking about or a move that no one's talking about that may happen, and they have up until free agency. But at this point, I don't think it's so much that the Clippers have failed. It's just that the Lakers are doing as if they lost last year in the second round. That's how they're treating free agency, with a sense of urgency.
Well, let me say this, Matt, before we close this segment. I totally agree with you. I think Kawhi Leonard needs to be in the eye of the storm. And the last person I want to hear from this on this subject is Max. And Max, here is why. You are living proof that Kawhi Leonard has not received enough blame, because after they wet the bed and folded, let go of a 3-1 lead against the Denver Nuggets in the conference semifinals, failing to get to the NBA Finals, all you said was, oops. If it were LeBron James, think about what we would have done to him had he come up short after having those expectations. He would have been crucified. But Kawhi Leonard is allowed to just fade into the twilight. They say, and the Max Kellermans of the world say, oops, and he's about to go on his merry way, still having the New Balance commercials. Barely anybody's talking about him. And I'm saying, yo, it's time for him to be put in that eye of the storm the way LeBron and KD and others are, and then we can judge him.
That's ridiculous. He got lots of criticism, including by me, for choking in the second half of a Game 7, which is what he did. But had Paul George been giving him superstar support, which is what he's there for, it might have been different. If you watched that Clippers-Nuggets series and you came away from it thinking,
I can't talk to you when you lie.
Not Paul
I can't
George.
talk to you when you lie. I can't talk to you when you lie.
Never lie.
You're lying.
If the roles were reversed, if we're putting Kawhi as one of the top players, if not the top player in the world right now, the difference between his criticism and what LeBron would have still been getting up until next season starts, and even if he won a championship next year, they still would have talked about the season before. Stephen A. has a point. Kawhi definitely hasn't got the criticism that comes with being a superstar of your team, calling shots on your team, and not coming through. So that's why I'm looking for a bounce back season for Kawhi and PG.
Kawhi got criticized.
All right, we'll leave it on that note.
Stop
Max
lying.
calls it never lying.
Just stop lying. Don't lie on national television.
You
said oops.
With the lie on
you said oops.
All right, bye, Matt. Good to see you. We'll talk to you.